Welcome back. All right, so I'm going to talk about Too Hot to Handle. I'm well aware this video will probably get about 500 views. But this is an example of why, I enjoy doing videos that if 20 people are going to enjoy said video, I have no problem making the video for those 20 people. And I think, again, that Too Hot to Handle from a sociological aspect, from that perspective, it's an interesting show. And comparing it with others, like Farming for Love, we've got one more episode to watch, but it's just such a huge difference. Like it could not be more opposite. One feels quaint and puritanical and sweet, and the other one's very much not. Although towards the end, everybody was behaving, and what was driving me insane was usually early on in the season, around the middle, when everybody's behaving, money goes back into the pot. Where Lana, which is the disembodied voice that tells them how much money they've lost or gained, will say, "Everybody behaved. I'm putting 20,000 back in the pot. I'm putting 10,000 back in the pot." Instead, there was no opportunity for them to make any of the money back, which really disappointed me. It feels like the show's getting cheap. Like here's how I see it, and it's a little bit cynical. Now, I pride myself on being optimistic on the hockey channel. I'm going to be cynical here. It feels like the showrunners try to make sure they cost these people as much money as possible and then don't give them much of a chance to win the money back. So they put them in situations where you're going to mess up. It's going to happen. And it's just ridiculous. And yet, the opportunity when people behave to win some of that money back, it doesn't feel like it's as common now as it was. And it's not as common, at least it doesn't feel like it's as common on the American version of the show as on the international versions of the show. Although the international versions of the show can be completely bonkers, especially the Brazilian one. But anyways, I digress. So Elise wins, even though she cost them $48,000 of the prize winnings, which I don't understand. Because there's people in the villa who didn't mess around, didn't do anything to cost any money, and they walk out with nothing. They walk out with more followers on TikTok or Instagram. They walk out with some recognition of who they are, and the one thing they do come out with is it feels like they really do end up being good friends. And with the circle, you see that you get added to the group. That the group gets bigger every time there's another season of the circle. With the dating shows, it feels like those casts really bond to one another, and so you'll still see them in each other's Instagram for years after. They're friends for life, right? So I think that's cool and that's fine, and I'm sure they appreciate that. But for somebody who's been on the show from day one and never cost a cent out of that $200,000 pot, it has to be frustrating to see the person winning being somebody who cost you 48,000. You can smile all you want, but in the back of your mind, you're like, this really sucks. This is where I need to have the one with the rabbit, right? This is where I need that rabbit one. Can I find it? Can I find it right now? Not really. Nah. No. Nope. It's not there. At least not easily found. That's too bad. Because there it is. I found it. So I've got this magnet that was a decal that I got. Yeah, I say decal. I'm Canadian. This sucks big time. So this I think is how somebody might have felt knowing that somebody who cost about a quarter of the pot gets to potentially walk out with the whole thing, decides to split it with Dre, and it has to be frustrating. Like, you behaved forever, you don't do anything stupid, and the person who tried to burn the school down gets, valedictorian. Anyways, so I don't even know how that works. But anyways, so I wanted to talk about some stuff too that I noticed as the season went along. The first thing I want to mention is alcohol. Now, I'll get to the whole production thing pretty soon here. But what I noticed was they go out and they have a toast at the end. There's like this much, and it was either wine or champagne or whatever they're drinking, right? There's like this much in the bottom of a glass. Now, if you watch the show the whole way through, it feels like the alcohol gets cut back. So it does definitely feel like they give them a bunch of alcohol. These are people running around in bikinis and shorts, and they're not wearing a lot. And you give them a bunch of alcohol, and they're in their early 20s, and they're promiscuous because that's how you hired them. Well, what's going to happen? Right? And as the season goes along, it feels like there's less alcohol. And they're given less. And I just mean on this show. I don't mean just in general. I know Love is Blind. There's been talk about how much alcohol they give people. And there's been some controversy about that it's too much. And that if you get water brought in, that they'll add alcohol to your water. Like, it's just ridiculous. And again, this is the kind of stuff that makes me want to talk about this. Not all the, oh, who's going to end up with who. I don't really care so much for that. I mean, when the deceptions happen and people backstab each other, I'm surprised as much as anybody. But I'm not as interested in all the couple stuff as I am about, hey, there was a mistake there. So the deceptive editing really shows up. So with Louis, every time they showed him talking about Christine, he was always shirtless, and he seemed to be shirtless for most of his back, his isolated interviews. But when they went to Christine, she was wearing different dresses each time they went back to her. And I know I talked about this in the last video too, but it keeps happening. And once I realized that this was happening, I noticed it was happening with other people too. So they would go to a reaction shot where somebody's like, "This is bonkers. I can't believe this is happening." And then they go back to whatever's happening. It's like, well, when did they record that? But like, she's not wearing that right now on the show, so it wasn't then. I don't remember when she wore that, but it had to have been a while ago. When was that recorded? Well, like, they splice all this stuff in there, and what drives me nuts too, and if you watch it, you'll see it. So they'll show the back. I keep wanting to say backstage because that's kind of how I see it, is like that's the backstage portion. So I'll refer to as backstage. The 20 people will understand what I mean. But it feels like when they do the backstage interviews, that while they're showing them on camera, so they're showing them talking to the camera, the audio's fine. As soon as they have that audio layered over a scene, so they show them talking and then they go to the scene, the audio changes. And it feels like maybe they splice in certain words, or maybe they're omitting part of what they said. And it really feels deceptive. It really does. Like, once you've noticed they do it, it's something I've noticed on Hell's Kitchen. I've noticed it on Master Chef, where especially Chef Ramsay, that something will be said, and Yvonne and I have figured this out. He didn't say that. In that moment, he did not say that to the cast. He did not say that to them. That's not what he said. I don't know what he said, but that's not what he said. Because they don't show his lips moving, and you listen to what is being said, and you can tell that it's been fixed in post, that it's been added in post, where he's been in a studio and done the voiceover. So there's some deceptive editing in almost everything that's qualified as reality TV, but I understand that. Now, one thing I didn't understand was, so Louis goes out on a date with this Lindsay girl, and she's like, "Hey, you like my boobs? You want to touch them?" Sure. So he just barely touches them, and then he stops, and then he realizes, I have a girlfriend back at the villa. She's probably not going to be happy, and because he's dumb, he decides not to tell her. I don't understand why they don't tell. Like, they're gonna find out. Guys, girls talk. Women will talk. So if you are saying something to one person who is in that same social circle as the person you're talking about, it's gonna get back to that woman that you said that. So I do not understand why people are so surprised on these shows that women talk and compare notes. And it is always funny in these dating shows, because there's times where I'll see a guy just mess up and he just does something really dumb, and I'm like, he's finished. Because this young lady now is going to tell all the other young ladies in this villa what he did, and all of them are going to say, "I'm not dating him. No way, no chance. Not after what he did to her." Especially if she's popular and they all know she's a really sweet person. You're done. And that happens on these dating shows. And I'm like, yeah, so he's going home because nobody's going to pair up with him. But what I don't understand is, so there was a fine for this. Like, Lana fines, I think it was like $3,000. So that's less than a kiss. If you really think about it, it'll make your head explode like scanners. But you can rub suntan lotion on somebody's backside, and that's perfectly fine. We have seen this multiple times, and every time I've put my hand up, because it's polite, and asked my wife, just like, a hypothetical. And I'm going to ask this. So you can walk into a room and find your significant other giving a chicken peck to somebody, so just barely a kiss, which on this show is $3,000, or you find them straddling the person and rubbing suntan lotion on their backside. Which of those would you find was a little more invasive and harder to explain and or forgive? Right. So the logic of what is a fine is not logical. But I think I get it, because if they allowed kissing, then they would just do that. It wouldn't be a big deal. But I think there should be an allowance for just the casual, like you, and you see it. There's so many times on the show where a couple will just, hey, so I'll talk to you later, and they go to give each other a kiss, and they're like, whoa, I almost kissed her. Because that's natural. That's what you do every time Yvonne leaves the house. That's what happens. I give her a kiss every time, and there are definitely times where I'll say, "I'm sorry. I think we just lost $6,000 because it's ridiculous." And the NDAs, the non-disclosure agreements that you have to sign to go on these shows. We are 20 years, more than 20 years. What, 25 years past the first season of Survivor? It drives me nuts. It drives me crazy that we don't have a show where we get to see the behind the scenes stuff, get to see production. Because every time that, you see people out there, and again, in the villa, they're, talking and whatever and hanging out, and then they go inside. And when you go inside, you see there's all new outfits. There might be new bed sheets. There might be new stuff on the walls. And all I think is, so they're not allowed inside because productions change things. And again, when they're having like a party outside, there's for the beach party or the pool party, they had beach balls, they had drinks, and they had everything. And I thought, okay, so they weren't allowed outside. I don't even know if they were allowed to look outside while all that stuff's being put together. My guess is probably not. And then they go running out. Now, Big Brother is as close to transparent about that as you get, although they just cut the feeds when things are going on a lot of the time, which is somewhat frustrating. But again, when they start talking, when Big Brother, they have the 24/7 live feed, when they start talking about production stuff, the feed cuts. The feed cuts. And from what I understand, the people in the house get told you're not allowed to talk about that, which is interesting because there was one instance with Big Brother where one of the people in the house said, it was Jen, who said that they're telling me to vote this person out, meaning production. Production wants me to vote this person out. I don't want to vote that person out. I don't think that person should go home this week. And again, the feeds cut immediately when she started talking about this. And then eventually she got booted out. And they edited it to make her look as crazy as humanly possible on her way out the door. But she spilled the beans that the people running these shows have an idea of who they'd like to be in there. And there are times where somebody's on the show and, my wife will ask, why are they on here? And I'm like, for chaos. They were brought in for chaos. They were brought in, the people that hired them to be on the show know what they're going to do, and it's chaos. And I even think it's to the point where when somebody new is coming into these shows, they're told, can you stir things up? Can you make sure that these people are kind of at each other's throats a little bit when you first go into the villa? Yeah, and then settle down and you can hang out with them. But we'd really like some drama when you go in. We need some drama when you go in. And so I do wonder. Now, one thing that just got me last night on this too. So Alex and Louie, two guys who were paired up. There were only two couples by the end of the season, which also was interesting. I think the fact that you had so many people who were there who weren't in a couple and seemed perfectly happy. There's a storyline there that the show didn't want to look at, which is, hey, these people are single and they're okay with it. Which, considering the way the show started, I thought that's growth, but it wasn't worth any money to the show, because why? But Alex and Louie were both offered $25,000 to leave the villa and to leave their prospective girlfriends on the show. And they were told that if they didn't take the 25,000, that they were not eligible for the $100,000 prize. I'm taking the $25,000 and leaving. And I mean that. And I even turned to Yvonne and I said, I love you, but I under that circumstance, I would leave. Because otherwise, you're probably going to get nothing. It's not like we're not near the end. So they were like one day from getting out. I mean, I would just tell my significant other, I'd say, yeah, well, we've just started dating. I now have $25,000. I'll be waiting for you just outside the doors here. And we can go out on one heck of a date, and then we can go on a trip. What kind of trip do you want to go to Spain or Italy or Germany? Where do you want to go? Name it. I have $25,000. We're gonna go. Like I don't. Both of them rejected it. Now, what's interesting is neither of those couples are still together. In fact, people have done their sleuthing on the internet, and Christine and Louis do not follow each other on Instagram. So something went sour when they came out, which anybody watching the show knew was going to happen. So Alex and Elise tried to make it work. Apparently, after 6 months, just the long distance, it didn't work, which we knew it wouldn't. One thing that's interesting with this one is, of course, you have the U.S. and U.K. Mixed on this, and it's just not going to work. I don't understand why they don't have a UK version of the show and a US version of the show. They have that with Love Island. There's no reason they can't with Too Hot to Handle. It's a cheap enough show to produce. You could absolutely cast UK and US people, and then there's more of a chance of the couples lasting. Like it doesn't make sense, right? They even have Aussies on here, and it's like, what are the Aussies? How's that going to work? If they live in Australia and you live in the US, what are you even doing? So and again, you're in a villa, you're in this bubble atmosphere, and you know, you've got this beautiful beach and ocean all around you, and it's so romantic, and all the alcohol you can drink. But then you get into the real world, and the real world is quite different. And if somebody lives in one spot and you live in another, and they happen to be on opposite sides of the globe, odds are it's not going to work. Last night watching the one of the finale episodes for Farming for Love, and Farmer has his farm in Kelowna. She lives in Whitehorse. Those are nowhere near one another. Now he's willing to buy a farm in Whitehorse and maybe move up there. She has a job, she has a career, she doesn't want to sacrifice that. So they're a couple, but are they going to make it is a good question. And I haven't looked up which couples are still together from that show. But that's within the same country. And it still may not work because Canada's bloody huge. Anyways, so no couples are still together. And I think this is kind of damning for the show's idea here. The show sells itself as, we're going to fix these people and make them commit. What? Like there's even a moment where Alex and Elise, who are together, if they don't end up being boyfriend and girlfriend, they could be out. Why? Like they're hanging out, they're having fun together, they're coupled up, they're not flirting with anybody else, but they don't have enough of an emotional connection. So since the emotional connection isn't deep enough, they might get thrown out. Why? Not everybody moves at the same rate, especially when you're talking about a few weeks. Like it's insane. I can't imagine that. If I had a little Cone telling me that, I'd be like, sorry, Cone, I'm out of here. Can I have $25,000? Thanks. Hey, Elise, I'll meet you at the door on your way out. So, you know, enjoy the 100,000. I'll have 25,000 on the way out. But the other thing that drove me nuts with this was the 25 grand that these guys turned down. So that's $50,000 the show is offering these guys does not go in the pot. And I thought when they turn down the 25,000, that'll go in the pot, and then it'll be a $150,000 pot. But because the show is cheap now, you offer the money that you have, and then when they don't take it, you keep it for yourself. You pocket it. So I really wish there was a behind the scenes show. I really do. I wish there was something that showed us how things really are. I really wish they wouldn't do the deceptive editing. You know, if I could throw a show together like this, and I would, if I had the budget, I absolutely would. There wouldn't be deceptive editing. I would be completely transparent about what goes on behind the scenes. I would have you meet the camera people and the production team and the medics and everybody who works behind the scenes, because there's a whole industry that employs tens of thousands of people who we never see ever on TV. And so I kind of feel for them on some level because they're working. You know, while these people are hanging around and boob grabbing or making out or whatever they're doing all this work to make sure the place is clean. They're doing all the work to make sure that everything is sanitary, I would imagine. There's certain regulations they got to make sure, because these people are all in their early 20s. You're going to have slobs. And so if you saw them putting their suitcases together when they get voted out, they're slobs a lot of the time. Although they have been voted out, so they might not be all that concerned with keeping things neat. But it feels like with these shows that there's definitely a side they don't want to show, because you can't let people know what the reality is. Why not? Why not? Why not show us the production crew? I don't think there's any problem with that, and I think it'd be actually really interesting to have one of these shows where you can see the crew, what they do day to day, or split it. You know, have one that's edited like this, and then have one that's just streaming online where you're following the production crew. You can have one person with a camera who's following around, you know, people that are putting together these scenes and everything, and maybe something breaks, something happens. There's obviously got to be things that happen with this show that it doesn't work. Maybe there's a challenge they want to do and they realize this doesn't work. Things that they edit out. You know, it's basically you get 1 hour of broadcasting for 24 hours of a day, and none of it involves production. There has to be a lot of stuff going on with production. I think they're missing out. Personally, I think they're missing out. And for me, somebody who really loves people watching, that works. I used to like going to the mall. I used to like going to the mall on Christmas Eve. I wouldn't shop because I was done. My Christmas shopping was done in early December. I made sure my Christmas shopping was done before the crowds got crazy. And I would go on Christmas Eve and just sit in the food court, or I would sit on a bench in the middle of the mall, and I would just watch people. I would watch the panicked people. I'd watch the angry people. I'd watch the screaming children. I would watch the whole thing, and I would just watch as it was chaos. And I found it fascinating. And so before reality TV, I was just at the mall watching it in real life because I found it fascinating, and now it's part of TV industry's main source of income. And now with the Hollywood strike, this is really going to take over. It does feel like reality TV is going to be even more prevalent when the dust settles on the strike, because again, they're not actors, so you have to pay them to act, and you don't have writers, so you don't have to worry about paying writers. There's going to be even more of the reality TV, I think, going forward. Sadly, I don't find it real enough, but it's still interesting, you know. And Dre, he should have had the whole $100,000, because when he spent $6,000 kissing somebody and he realized that was a mistake, that he was just, I don't know, it was his male ego, and he didn't really like the person. He just kind of like his male ego was bruised. I think when he apologized to her and he's like, yeah, that wasn't cool, I shouldn't have done that, they should have put the $6,000 back in the pot. Honestly, I think they should have. And for whatever reason, this show is set up where you give them a bunch of alcohol early on and you cost them as much money as possible. The workshops early on, too, are so absolutely sexually charged. And it's like, what are you doing? So it's all, I want to build emotional connections between my guests. No, you don't. You want to make them frustrated and angry, give them a bunch of alcohol, and watch them as they cost the whole group money. And then all the fights break out. Give me a break. Anyways, I'm done for now. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And again, please, 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 some reality show somewhere, show us the behind the scenes stuff. Like every time that something happens on a reality show and you see a medic, or you see the camera crews, or you see, like, it's like, we're not supposed to see that. Did you see that? That's not supposed to happen. Make that part of the show. Seriously. But maybe it's just me. Let me know if you agree or don't agree, and why not. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.